And away we go. Welcome back, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be in the world. Welcome back once again to Coffee Talk Live, or at Coffee Talk Live on YouTube. If you're looking for me on YouTube, or Prepper University on YouTube, as I broadcast live on both channels. And it is currently 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time where I am sitting. And of course, you can always also find me and Dusty. There's Dusty, everybody, for those of you who are watching. Come on, Dusty. Ready to get down? Go ahead. For those of you who are watching on fistfulofradio.com, fistfulofradio.com, broadcasting and podcasting out of Atlanta at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Thursday, and 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Friday. And as always, I try to read as many of the comments as I can so that people who are listening and not watching understand the conversation. They don't think I'm just talking to myself. And I'll read off a few of the people who have chosen to comment and join us here so far today. I see Helter is here, Dragon, Urban, D-Lo, Spectre. Johnny says he's listening while doing chores. Boogers is here. Fluke Man is here. And Johnny wants to know if Dusty ever gets dusty. Yeah, if she goes in the garage, she does. Arakel is here. Cat Rose is here. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Or it may be a different time zone where you are, and that's perfectly understandable. Hopefully, did I blink out? A little bit of a connectivity problem right there. I'm having trouble getting the comments listed now. It won't come up. Yeah, blacked out for a second. There's some kind of connectivity problem. Here we go. Fluke Man says, what would do about Edward Snowden and whistleblowers in general? Helter says, yes, you did. Cat says 11 a.m. on the West Coast. Excuse me. And Johnny says, I'm freezing. And this is hard lined. I'm not using Wi-Fi. So something else going on there. But what would I do about Edward Snowden and other whistleblowers in general? I'd like to see them treated better. Let me throw that out here. Go chase that in the hallway. Good Lord. I didn't know there was that many of them sitting in the room. There's like 6 of them sitting behind me. I didn't realize when I threw that ball. Anyways, whistleblowers get treated very badly. They always tell you, see something, say something. They want you to be a whistleblower. They want you to rat on people. They want you to tell them when something illegal is going on. And then when you do come forward, when you do speak your mind, when you do expose things, you're the one that ends up getting screwed. Edward Snowden is a great example of that. I would like to see people who are legitimate whistleblowers who talk about things that are going on, that are illegal, that are going to that are causing problems, that are hurting people. I would like to see whistleblowers for that not get destroyed for it. I've been a whistleblower myself and exposed things that were going on. And all that ever happened from it was I got in trouble. And I've seen that happen to many other people as well. There they go again. There's that ball. I'm going to make a lot of noise in here. If it gets to be too much, I'll throw the ball out again, but they keep bringing it back. Whistleblowers in real life, they get ostracized. They lose their jobs. They lose their credibility. They may not be able to work in that field again. There are certain circumstances by which there is some sort of compensation. Like I know if you're a whistleblower to the IRS because a company is doing something incorrect with their taxes, they'll give you a kickback. It's not enough to recover how much of your life has been destroyed. In real life, whistleblowers get crushed. So there we go. Monkey says tomorrow's going to be a fun day. He's looking at an apartment that looks promising. Well, good luck with that. And Cat says, how many cats? If you're probably aware, if you've been watching the channel long enough, my wife and I, we take care of stray animals, cats mostly we end up with. And with the mama and kittens we just picked up, we currently have 8 in the house and 5 outside. We had rehomed 2 recently, but then ended up with 4 more, including the kittens that are tearing around in here right now. And then, of course, there's Dusty sitting there staring at me, because that's what Dusty does. And, we'll work on them, get them comfortable with people again, or if they've ever been around people. Odds are they are, because Mama has had her ear clipped. She's fixed. And then try to rehome them and go from there. Bingo is here. Thanks for joining us today, Bingo, as we get ready to start delving deep into the news. Before that, I just want to confirm something for you, because I had said something yesterday, and I do like to try to let people know I'm not just making crap up. So I'm going to show you this really quick. I talked about Wegovy yesterday, and there you are. There's Morgan & Morgan, and this is the submission form to join the lawsuit against Wegovy, because a lot of people have been permanently injured or killed by this medication. Already approved and put on the market and sold out. Oh, here comes Uncle. I'll bring Uncle up to the camera. You don't see him too often. And put out there, sold out on the market. American prescriptions couldn't even be filled. Tested, approved by the FDA. I showed the commercial for it a few weeks ago, because like half of the commercial is side effects. It's scary stuff. And already there's lawsuits. And I just wanted to show you that I wasn't just making that up. And here is Prime Mover. He says he is here to cause trouble. I think these kittens are here to cause trouble. I don't want to run one over. Come here, Uncle. Come here, buddy. I always like to bring Uncle out if I can, real quick, because this is what 20 pounds of cat looks like. Well, 19 pounds, 12 ounces. So about 20 pounds of tuxedo cat. Starving to death when he first showed up. And very feral. And now look at him. Now he's a huge baby. And we let him stay in the house because he's mellowed out so much that he's great with other cats. Like when we brought the kittens in, the other cats didn't want anything to do with them, and he was the first one to come up to them and play with them and stuff like that. So a complete 180 from how he was when we first got him. But yeah, there he is. He's a monster now. Well, physically, he's a big boy. And we'll get into the news here in a second. BAMS says safe and effective. According to the FDA, it is. Monkey says cute cat, and Cruising says such a tiny meow for such a big boy. Yeah, he doesn't make a lot of noise. He doesn't make a lot of noise. And we're going to jump to some Canadian news here. Oh, we're going to jump to some Canadian news here. Who's here from Canada today? I know a couple of you are. And I wanted to throw this out and just discuss this real quick. I'm sure you've heard of this before. And this comes from the Washington Examiner. One more here from Kat, who says a lot of the time the potential side effects are worse than what's being treated. Indeed. And that's really the point. It's like, why would you want to take all this medication and the side effects are worse? I'd rather deal with whatever I've got going on than add to the problem with the side effects of this medication, especially when you're talking like suicidal thoughts, abdominal tears, and bone loss, and all kinds of weird stuff that did it again. That makes me nervous. Monkey says he has a friend that literally to ride across in Lake Erie. This is from the Washington Examiner, and it says Canada's mass grave hoax is another irreversible lie of the cultural left. But the Canadian government is the cultural left. So what do you want? In May 2021, the Tecumseh, the Secwepemc, I don't know how to pronounce that properly, an indigenous tribe in southern British Columbia, announced the discovery of a mass grave containing the remains of 215 indigenous children at former Catholic residential schools, citing anomalies detected by ground-penetrating radar and the community's assurance that the atrocity had been confirmed. The announcement garnered global media coverage and sparked a nationwide cultural backlash against the Catholic Church. In the ensuing months, dozens of Canadian churches were torched. Prime Minister Trudeau described this as understandable anti-Catholic hate crimes, which rose by 260%. Priests and nuns were spat on the streets. Worldwide sentiment towards Catholics plummeted to even more profound depths. Suddenly, former Catholic residential school students in Canada were being referred to as survivors, as though the schools were the moral equivalent of Nazi concentration camps. Those who questioned the existence of these mass graves or critiqued the ensuing moral panic were labeled residential school denialists. Divergence from the official narrative was grounds for termination, cancellation, and
what we found was heartbreaking.
Yeah, be quiet. We're not ready to listen to you. The mass grave discovery was, in the eyes of many, the Canadian equivalent of the George Floyd murder. For his part, Trudeau did everything in his power to stoke the controversy for his own benefit. Of course he did. He demanded an apology from the Vatican with a quivering voice on behalf of the Indigenous children, which he incidentally received from Pope Francis. He ordered flags to be flown at half-mast for 6 months, visited one of the supposed mass graves for a ghoulish photo-op with teddy bear in hand. To say nothing else, Trudeau is adept at seizing every opportunity to cement his bona fides as a progressive culture warrior and punish his political foes. The only problem is, of course, that the, quote, mass graves story has fallen apart in recent weeks. Reporting from the New York Post revealed that excavations of the alleged mass grave sites have produced no human remains. In their rush to leverage a story that was convenient for their preferred ideological agenda, it appears that both the Canadian government and the global news media failed to confirm facts and instead relied upon an unverified radar anomaly and ancient rumors. Oops. Oops. There we go. Yeah, Bam says buffering. Yeah, is it still buffering or am I normal again? Because that's twice now that it's done that to me. PV is here. Thanks for joining us today, PV. Urban says, oh no, but ground penetrating radar pictures were shown on CBS, so it must be true. Pretty much. And of course, you know, activists are going to run with it because it serves their purpose. They're going to get people's emotions stirred up, and that's one of the big problems where human beings are concerned and where media is concerned, is they whip up your emotions and people don't think logically. Okay, you know what? You found some anomalies. There's some rumors about kids being buried. Let's go dig it up, and then we'll see. No, we can't do that. And Trudeau is right on board with running that train right down everybody's throat and causing as much trouble as he can so that he can put himself on a pedestal. Helter said, this is a lesson on how reactionary behavior is very ignorant and devastating. People's reactions reveal what they are: intolerant and ignorant, or intelligent and conscientious. Bam says, Catholic Church, straight from hell. Yeah, the 7-day Adventists will tell you that. Prime Mover says, people who think their feelings are always dangerous. Cruising says, I got into an argument with someone about the mass grave nonsense. They refused to believe anything except the original. They refused to even acknowledge the facts. Tribes attacked the U.S. in 1790s. Sure, they did. Not all the tribes. And this is where it gets confusing. There was more than 5,000 tribes in the United States. Okay. And when I say tribes, I don't mean like large groups of people. There could have been as few as 100 people in a tribe. They did not get along with each other for the most part, and they did not get along with us. Some of them were peaceful, but unlike how the media portrays it, most of them really kind of weren't. But you're not allowed to say that, unfortunately. They could be vicious. They could be very vicious and have some bizarre pagan rituals that would strongly contrast with most people, with most other religious understandings and beliefs, especially when you're talking about a nation founded on basic Christianity. And no, they were not handled right. No, they were not treated right, but they weren't as wonderful and friendly and peachy keen as the media would have you to believe otherwise. As I read a few more of these comments and move on here. Dragon says, unfortunately, the damage has been done not only to historic churches, but also to the reputation of Canada's history. The Liberal left got what they craved. Yeah, I mean, people were losing their jobs. People were being threatened. People were being hurt. There was violence, obviously, for literally just being logical about it and saying, okay, well, we don't know for sure. Let's find out. Anomalies, it could be air pockets under the ground. There could be sinkholes forming. It could be water. It could be anything. Let's dig it up and see. No, you're You're in denial. Let's attack you for it. All People is here. Thank you for joining us. Stacy Lynn is here. As we move on, Urban says, even if it wasn't a hoax, we get mad at the church. It was the government that administered the program. That's a good point. That is a good point. And Monkey said, other channels I watch that involve Canada, not Canadian news, but more like Canada doing international relations. More and more people are hating Trudeau in the comments. Yeah, well, he's not well liked, but he's not going anywhere either, not easily. And Kat says it's not buffering for them. It went black on my end a couple of times. That's why I say that. Zane says, no, it was hyper complex state of affairs. Many tribes were incredibly xenophobic. And Cruising says your 1619 folks want to say the U.S. stole the idea of constitutional democracy from the Iroquois nation. It's all very amusing on some level. And Zane says the U.S. signed treaties and then broke them. Show me a government that hasn't. Fluke Man says their outrage was something they have no evidence for that possibly happened over 150 years ago, but they don't care with the boys that got raped by Catholic priests. And Kat says, true. And All People says, exactly. The Disney version of history is such a lie. So many of the tribes were not peaceful, even with each other. Many of the tribes were terrified of each other. There's some pretty, like the Mohawk. I think everybody was terrified of the Mohawk in their day. Cruising says, this also reminds of Clovis Fist doctrine, where they don't let you dig deeper in some Stone Age sites to see what might be under the Clovis culture finds. Ali is here. Says, I'm here. YouTube deleted my comment about the cat being hike and chonker. I suppose I'm fat shaming the cat. That's funny. You can't trust how that operates. All People says, Justin Trudeau is determined to destroy Canada. And Stacy says the Catholic popes are, yeah, I can't read that, Stacy. You're going to get me in trouble. Playground watchers. We'll call it playground watchers. And Zane said tribes told settlers they were trespassing, and when settlers kept moving in, the tribes fought back. As we move along, another one. Oh, is this also from Canada? Why, yes, it is. More news from Canada. One more here, just to let you know how totalitarianistic Canada is becoming. As we move on, and this comes from CBS News. CBS News Canada, while they're still allowed to show news, because of course there's going to be censoring news, and especially anything from social media here. Empty shelves with absolutely no books, confusion around new equity-based process. I heard it was 2009. This says 2008, but same difference. 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Harry Potter, The Hunger Games, Rolling Thunder, Hear Me Cry. Those are all examples of books Rena Takata says she can no longer find in her public high school library in Mississauga, Ontario, which she visits on her lunch hour most days. In May, Takata says the shelves at Arundel Secondary School were full of books, but she noted that they had gradually started to disappear. When she returned to school this fall, things were more stark. This year, I came into my school library, and there are rows and rows of empty shelves with absolutely no books, said Takata, who started grade 10 last week. She estimates more than 50% of her school library books are gone. In the spring, Takata says students were told by the staff that if the shelves look emptier right now, it's because we have to remove all books published prior to 2008. Takata is one of several Peel District School Boards. Students, parents, and community members, CBC Toronto spoke to who are concerned about a seemingly inconsistent approach to a new equity-based, and always get nervous about that term equity when it's used in the modern era, book weeding process implemented by the board last spring in response to a provincial directive from the Minister of Education. They say the new process, intended to ensure library books are inclusive, appears to have led some schools to remove thousands of books solely because they were published in 2008 or earlier. Parents and students are looking for answers as to why this happened and what the board plans to do moving forward. Well, I tell you what, they're not going to do what the parents or the students want. They're going to do whatever the hell they want. Where are we here? Helter says it's buffering again. Well, I'm sorry about that. I don't know. I don't think it's anything on my end because, like I said, I'm hard lined in. I'm not using Wi-Fi. So there really shouldn't be issues. Monkey says, have you heard Hunter Biden got indicted on a gun charge? Not that it matters for someone with rich and powerful people in play. Yeah, I saw that. That was breaking news about an hour ago, I think. That he got indicted, but big deal. I mean, what does that mean? What does that mean? They'll take his picture and send him home. Zane says the Iraqi didn't invent the idea of modern democracy. They had a matrilineal clan-based system of government based on 3 clans, kind of like a board of directors. All right. All People says, meanwhile, they fill the shelves with explicit alphabet soup books that are so inappropriate for even adults, let alone kids and teens. That's probably what's going to happen. Prime Mover says book burning without the flames. Indeed. And Savage says, by my own family's accounts, Indians were all bloodthirsty. Well, shall I say savages? My people moved to the Indian Territory in 1866-ish. Fresh after the Civil War, Oklahoma was still wild. And Zane says Native American influence on the Founding Fathers is next to non-existent. And Helter said this sounds like a lot of lazy and or overworked teachers saw the pre-2008 designation and stopped the vetting process there. There's a whole acronym they're supposed to use, MUSTY. Weird that classics like Anne Frank and the Hungry Caterpillar would be considered unfit without any critical thinking as to why they should stay. No. And you are, they're claiming to make it more inclusive, but you're not making it more inclusive if you're denying other people literature that they might be interested in. Rodney says Trudeau and those like him are using 1984 as an instruction manual as opposed to a warning. Absolutely. And that's an Orwellian concept. Cruising says, where are the hit stories about the progressive banning books? That's what the media calls removing porn manuals from school libraries in Florida. Indeed. And Kat says that means classic literature will be gone. Well, they've already been removing it. And they say, oh, it's not banned because you can still get it. Yeah, you can get it aftermarket, but you can't find the stuff in libraries anymore. Remember this year, and I had shown this a few weeks back, the publisher who now owns the rights to Dr. Seuss is canceling 7 of his books. They will never be published again, including his very first published work as a children's book. They're being canceled. They'll never be published again. You can still get them, and they'll say, oh, it's not canceled. You can get it. Yeah, if you go on eBay and buy it. Or Roald Dahl's works, and we've talked about this before as well on this podcast, that the publisher, and this is what happens, by the way, when you sell out, when a family sells out your legacy and you no longer have control over it. The publisher who owns Roald Dahl's works, is going to be editing all of his children's books to be more, quote, inclusive, because they felt it might be a little hurtful to people's little feelings. And JD says, I wouldn't have a problem burning all those alphabet books if they stocked up the libraries with. Yeah, a lot of people feel that way. And Urban says, I don't even understand how parents still keep their kids in public school in Canada. Charter schools and homeschool hubs are not that expensive. The only way forward is outside the public system. She doesn't want you sitting in the chair. Leave her alone. Yeah, I'm sure you heard that grumbling back there. You might have seen it over my shoulder. If a lot of people don't feel they have the time or the ability, but they need to make the time and they need to find that ability. And it's not that hard, honestly. Zane wants to know what my favorite classic literature books are. Actually, I favor Tintin a lot. I like Tintin. And Chris says Canada has imported so many immigrants that now the majority of the cities are Indians from India. Punjabs, people from what they used to call Hindustan. Dragon says, sounds like schools poorly implemented a bad school board policy based on a poorly defined ministerial directive. Bad decisions all around. And John has made it. He says, hello, cat fan. Chris says the natives would regularly scalp people. We're still talking about that. Alexander is here. Thanks for joining us today. Cruising says, Dragon, we call that Monday in education. Wow, that opened up a big can of worms. As I cut through some more of the comments, PV says, just like Nazi Germany, pretty insidious, but the people can't or will not do anything against it. No. And I'll remind you also, the United States is not above that sort of thing. And even right after World War II, if you remember the Sodi trials, seduction of the innocent trials that took place, where they were encouraging groups of people, the government, to burn comic books, which is why Golden Age books are so difficult to find and can be so terribly expensive, because they considered it to be a seduction of the innocent on account of a book that was written by a psychologist at the time who was trying to blame comic books for juvenile delinquency, who himself was so worried about it that the bibliography in the back of the book was hand cut out with straight edge razors by the publishing house before the books were put on the shelves, because they were afraid that the comic book industry would sue them. But people burned comics, and it's like you just went to war with a country that was burning books, and now you're going to burn books yourself. Go figure. How's that work for you? Chris said Canada doesn't have free speech and you can get arrested for misgendering someone. And Zane says the U.S. Constitution is based on English common law. I wish Indigenous Americans had influenced the Constitution. Well, it is what it is. Ali says a good place to find books is at Goodwill. All my books and suits come from Goodwill. And Kat says, oh, but inclusive doesn't include the alphabet soup. No, that's the alphabet soup gets put on the shelves first. And as you recall, there was that pastor at the school meeting in the United States, I forget which state it was, who read from one of those books and was repeatedly told by the school council to shut up because what he was saying was highly inappropriate. And he says, I'm reading something from one of your elementary school libraries. If you don't want to hear it, what makes you think we want our kids to read it? And all people's talking about Dr. Seuss being a CIA government agent and Roald Dahl was an occultist. Monkey says, I even hear schools are doing 4 days a week now with teachers quitting. Well, they're not learning anything in public school anyway. They may as well send the kids home. Fluke Man says, your cats actually understood what you just said. It's funny like that. Like if Uncle was close and I called him, he would come. Or if sometimes on the back porch, like Hobo gets riled up and he wants to give one of the other cats a hard time, I'll open the window and say, Hobo, leave him alone, and he'll sit down. He'll stop trying to fight. It's weird. But yeah, they kind of get used to you. I guess they can tell by your tone of voice. Chris said the Hindis hate the Sikhs. As we travel on here, and I'll go ahead and get into the next news story, which is about mosquitoes. And this comes from the LA Times. It's bad enough they're releasing them in Florida. Now we're releasing them in South America as well. As we take a look at this story, and it says mosquitoes, long the enemy, are now bred to help prevent the spread of dengue fever. For decades, it's dengue, right? For decades, preventing dengue fever in Honduras has meant teaching people to fear mosquitoes and avoid their bites. Now, Hondurans are being educated about a potentially more effective way to control the disease, and it goes against everything they've learned. I think it should go against everything everybody knows logically. That explains why a dozen people cheered last month as what? Tegucigalpa resident Hector Enriquez held a glass jar filled with mosquitoes above his head and then freed the buzzing insects into the air. Enriquez, a 52-year-old Mason, had volunteered to help publicize a plan to suppress dengue by releasing millions of special mosquitoes into the Honduran capital. Oh, no. And by the way, I want to point out, when they say he's a 52-year-old Mason, they mean he works with stones, not that he is a Mason. I just want you to understand that. The mosquitoes Enrique unleashed in his El Mansion neighborhood, an area rife with dengue, were bred by scientists to carry bacteria called Wolbachia that interrupt transmission of the disease. When the mosquitoes reproduce, they pass the bacteria to their offspring, reducing future outbreaks. This emerging strategy for battling dengue was pioneered over the last decade by the nonprofit World Mosquito Program. Oh, wow. And is being tested in more than a dozen countries, with more than half the world's population at risk of contracting dengue. The World Health Organization is paying close attention to the mosquito releases in Honduras and elsewhere, and it's poised to promote the strategy globally. In Honduras, where 10,000 people are known to be sickened by dengue each year, you know, demographically speaking, 10,000 people getting sick a year is not that bad. I'm just saying. Doctors Without Borders, oh, that's another little screw job operation, is partnering with the mosquito program over the next 6 months to release close to 9 million mosquitoes carrying Wolbachia. There is a desperate need for new approaches, said Scott O'Neill, founder of the mosquito program. Scientists have made great strides in recent decades in reducing the threat of infectious diseases, including mosquito-borne viruses such as malaria. But dengue is the exception. Its rate of infection keeps going up. The reason that the rate of infection keeps going up is because you keep killing their natural predators. I've done shorts out here. I put them up on Prepper University where they come through to spray for mosquitoes on the sides of the roads and in rural areas. Everything for 10 feet from the edge of the road in is dead a few days later. All of the plants, the trees, anything growing there is dead. You're not only are you killing with your mosquito and tick and flea spray all the plants, but you're killing all of the natural predators of the ticks and fleas and mosquitoes and such as well. If you keep killing or driving off the natural predators, you're going to have more mosquitoes, more fleas, and more freaking ticks. So instead of doing that, we want to keep spraying poisons, keep spraying biological agents. We want to keep making Frankenstein freaking mosquitoes. What do you expect? You know, you don't know truly what the long-term effect of that is. That could cause some kind of a long-term problem some generations from now, and people who get bit by these mosquitoes that you'll never be able to figure out. You'll never be able to pin on this, and that nothing will be done about when it happens. This is some scary crap. Zane says mosquitoes, yay. Indeed. Kat says there's been a couple of cases of West Nile here. And Bam says to keep you healthy and safe. Indeed. Prime Mover says unleash the skeeters. And Chris says I'm not going to let mosquitoes bite me. Why would you? Oh, it's okay to let them bite you now because they have some lab-grown bacteria that we've infected them with that they're supposed to mate with other mosquitoes and give to them. Yeah, makes perfect sense. Cruising says, yes, science messing with mosquitoes couldn't possibly go wrong again, could it? And there's Anarchy has just joined us. He says he hates mosquitoes. Urban says, I see where this is going. Get your toasty hot mosquito patties hot off the grill and enriched with the latest mystery vaccination for your protection. It's yummy, safe, and effective. Indeed. And PV says another biospheric intervention may well work, but again, what could go wrong? Indeed. JD says, what can go wrong when introducing a bioweapon in the mosquito population? And Zane said, birds eat mosquitoes. Yeah, bats eat them too. And we drive birds and bats off as well. We run them out. We make it so they can't nest. We destroy their natural habitats. You know, I remember even as a child growing up in Boston, there used to be massive flocks of pigeons and sparrows. Like you couldn't count them. There were thousands of them. Go look around in the Boston area now and see how many pigeons there are left. You know, Prime Mover says, is there any organism that I wish there were more of on this planet? It would have to be mosquitoes, hands down. No kidding. And Kat says, that is scary as all get out. Yeah, it sure is. It sure is. But they've already been doing this. And Kat says, possums eat ticks. Yes, indeed, they do. Miss Kitty, you need something, honey? Come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. Good girl. Good girl. What do you need, sweetie? All right, Miss Kitty is here. She rarely comes up to me unless she wants something. Here she is. Very, very sad case, Miss Kitty. She's the one that has the deformed leg because it was broken in a few places. You can't see it, but there's a lot of scars on her back. She's very, very scared of people. It's taken a long time to get her comfortable. Anyways, back to the comments. PV says the Australian cane toad introduction was a lesson to be learned from. That's right. Somebody brought the frogs there, and there was no natural predators for them, and they took over. They were invasive. Bam says next, some crazy people are going to block the sun. Yeah, Mr. Burns tried that. So we'll move on here and talk about presidential candidates. Presidential candidates. You want to hear about some GOP candidates, or one in particular? I've talked about this guy a couple of times, and this comes from UPI News. That's what I'm reading off of. UPI News. And it says GOP presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy. Is it Vivek or Vivek? I remember him correcting somebody on that, and I forget which one he said it was. Vows to cut federal workforce by 75%. And I'll do another comment here real quick, and then I'll get into that. Fluke Man said, didn't they release non-reproductive mosquitoes on some small island that wiped out about 90% of mosquito population on some small island 15 years ago? I don't know about that. I know they've done that in Florida, releasing them, and the idea is that the mosquitoes would mate with them instead of each other and then produce fewer mosquitoes. And I don't know if it's worked or not. Cruising says, I kill about 3 cane toads a week in my yard in Southwest Florida to protect my dog from them. I'm turning into an absolute assassin with my slingshot. Wow. But GOP. Yes, Chris, that came up a little earlier. Chris Trapp says Hunter Biden indicted. Yeah, we'll see how far that goes, because an indictment doesn't mean anything. It means he's going to get his photo taken. That's what it means. They're going to take his picture and send him home. So Vivek, is it Vivek or Vivek? I think it's Vivek Ramaswamy, the rising populist challenger to former President Donald Trump ahead of the 2024 presidential election, vows to cut the federal workforce by 75% by the end of his term, if elected. There are roughly 2.2 million civilians working for the federal government, Axios reported. Ramaswamy told the news organization he intends to reduce that number by 50% in his first year in office. Quote, keep in mind that 30% of these employees are eligible for retirement in the next 5 years, period, Ramaswamy said. So it is substantial, no doubt about it, but it's not as crazy as it sounds. The Republican said he would use executive authority to shut down redundant federal agencies in an attempt to reorganize the government. Several agencies Ramaswamy particularly intends to gut include the FBI. I've heard that. A target for conservatives in recent years, as well as the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives, the ATF, and the Department of Education, among others. His comments drew derision. He should add the IRS to that. Quote, the idea that a president would have the unilateral capacity to fire 1 million people is farcical. Norman Ornstein, An Demetrius scholar at the American Enterprise Institute told Axios. So who cares what he thinks? But Ramaswamy says the president does have the authority to make such cuts without congressional approval by using executive orders, which is true if he could pull it off, if he did win, if he does intend to follow up on the things that he claims he's going to do. Ramaswamy also made his remarks in a speech at the headquarters of the American First Policy Institute in Washington on Wednesday. During that speech, Ramaswamy said federal regulations act like a wet blanket on the U.S. economy and vowed to cut 50% of those regulations. Ramaswamy previously had said at an event in New Hampshire earlier this month that the Supreme Court would back his plan 6-3, given its current makeup. Ramaswamy is not the only Republican presidential candidate to pledge to cut the government, but his plan seems to go farther than those of his peers. Meanwhile, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has pledged to eliminate the IRS. This vision is not an original vision, I'll admit that, Ramaswamy said in his speech on Wednesday. So that would be nice if it is implemented and it's implemented properly. And I understand that there might be some concern about, well, and he did make the point, a lot of these people are going to be up for retirement in 5 years. So let them retire and don't hire somebody new. I get that. And you're going to have a lot of people, otherwise you're probably going to dump into the workforce. I understand that. There's an unemployment angle there. At the same time, there is a lot of redundant agencies, and there's a lot of government overreach that Americans are being crushed by and they're sick of. And we're getting that overreach from a lot of federal agencies. The ATF is a target. They're a pain in the butt. The FBI, which has been crooked nearly from its inception, appears that way anyways. I've got to be careful how I word that. Remember, I myself have been harassed by the FBI back in the day, back in 2003. I've talked about that on this channel before. The IRS, definitely, I've been harassed by them as well. And the IRS operates with impunity. They're as bad as any other federal agency because there's almost no restrictions on what they can do. And nobody wants to cross them. And they don't even have to talk to you. They don't even have to talk to you. They don't even have to tell you anything about your own case. It's insane. But I could see that. And it sounds good. It sounds good in his speech. It looks good on paper. Will he follow through with it? And if he does try to follow through with it, if he's elected, which, you know, as popular as a lot of the things he says may not be likely, he's going to have a lot of pushback from individuals and organizations and structure that has been in place for decades, many of them very likely corrupt, that are not going to let him get a foothold. They're going to fight and fight and fight and make his life hell. And Prime Mover says, Vivek, whatever it is, says too many things right. I don't trust him. And until he's proven himself, you shouldn't. That's healthy to not trust him. You shouldn't. And all people is talking about how Ramaswamy is a Soros puppet. Find someone who isn't. It's getting weird. Kat says, what will those people do for jobs? What do any of us have to do for jobs? And JD says, why doesn't Ramaswamy go make India great again? Because he's an American citizen. He was born here, obviously, or else he couldn't run. Zane says government needs to be restructured. Chris said federal workers will have to get a real job. Most of them work from home and do nothing. Helter says 75 reduction in federal staff in D.C. sounds good and will earn votes, but sadly not realistic, not necessarily. Zane says we should also cut military spending. Depends on what it is. I don't really have too much of a problem with military spending because remember, the rest of the world all hate us, although they hate us because of the things that our government does. I would rather see a cut in education because it's a money pit, as well as other programs. Really, they just need to spend the money right, and they wouldn't need nearly as much. And Urban says Vivek Ramaswamy. I got the Ramaswamy right, but the Vivek I didn't. So it is Vi, not Va. Okay, Vi. I'll try and remember that. Cruising says, funny how no one ever asks why ethno-European descended Americans don't go back to whichever European country to run for government. Let's just be happy Americans under the age of 70 are running now. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Zane says we should also abolish the reservation system in the U.S. and just give the national parks and other unused land back to tribes. Yeah, that'll never happen. Rock Valley says end the Federal Reserve. Ramaswamy says that he wants to take a stab at them as well. A lot of people suspect that's the true reason that that Kennedy was assassinated. As I cut through some more of these comments and move on to the next subject here. All People says Ramaswamy is a copycat fraud who mimics all the right words. Do not trust Ramaswamy. He's a Soros puppet. As we get on here. Monkey says if Vivek does try it, he's going to end up like JFK. Yeah, that's what I just said. JD says, besides all those ethno-European countries are being thoroughly invaded by third worlders. And he has someone that he thinks he can blame for it. Chris says Vivek is a Hindi, and a lot of Hindus are nationalists, so I don't trust them. And Fluke Man says, would you consider joining forces with Joshua Phillips, Crossroads, The Daily Wire, and etc. Safety in numbers, and they've got quite a lot of political power. Who, me? I'm not sure who that is. Johnny says they would try to impeach him if he tried to do that. Yeah, and what would that impeachment do? Remember, impeachment doesn't actually work. It's just words. And Zane says the world can hate us all that they want if we ended the NFA and they wouldn't need the military. And All People says being born in the United States may make you a citizen but by the law, but it does not make you an American from the heart. Yeah, I know what you mean. And Prime says Trump more likely to get JFK'd. And again, Ramaswamy says all the right things. It sounds good in a speech. It sounds good on paper. The one thing I do like about him is that he's not a politician officially. The Soros talk aside, he's not like decades in the game. I can't stand those kind of people. And I've got something coming up about that actually. Right, kitties? You calm now? They're waiting for trouble. That's what they're doing. Mischief makers. As we move along here, we can talk about, oh no. Hello, baby. How you doing? There you go. Kitten break, everybody. Kitten break. As we talk about illegal Senegalese migrants, because of course, they're coming across the border in droves, but they're not from South America. A lot of them are not from South America. Chris says so many people suffer from Trump derangement syndrome. Yeah, that's what they call it. And Lucky is here. He says, just wanted to say, hey, always a great show. I appreciate it. Thank you. I try. Just trying to speak my mind. I'm not always right. I try. But, at least I'm being honest with you about how I feel. And this comes from the Daily Mail. And it says illegal Senegalese migrants are among thousands released on the streets of Tucson, Arizona after 2,000 crossed the border from Mexico in the last 24 hours. 2,000 Senegalese people coming across the border in the last 24 hours. From where? Did they walk from Senegal? I don't think so. Migrants from Senegal are among the thousands being released to the streets of southwest border towns as federal processing centers are over capacity as a crush of crossings cripple the nation. Street releases of migrants are being ordered in Tucson, Arizona, with migrants from the African nations of Senegal, Mauritania, Guyana, Sudan, part of the migrants who have recently made crossings in the U.S. from Mexico. Those released are now forced to fend for themselves in intense heat and limited resources. I'm going to stop right there because I got something to say about that. First of all, I want to make it clear it's not Tucson. It's not by their choice they're releasing these people, and it's not by their choice they even collected them off the border in the first place. It's because the top of the food chain ordered them to cut them loose in the street. It's not saying that in this article. Second of all, those released, I'm going to read it again. Those released are now forced to fend for themselves in intense heat and limited resources. Where did these people come from? Where did they come from? African nations of Senegal, Mauritania, Guyana, and the Sudan. You want to tell me about intense heat and limited resources? Because some of those places are a hell of a lot hotter and drier than Tucson, Arizona, and have far fewer resources than they do. Okay? They're not worried about the heat, if nothing else. All right? I'm just saying. I'm just saying. A few more comments here. Prime Mover says, when all the kiddies are passed out, it's time to check the batteries in your carbon monoxide detector. No, they're all right. Chris Trapp says, Vivek took a 90,000 scholarship from Soros. Okay. And Zane says, Senegal is in Africa. That's right. So maybe they swam. Maybe they swam to Peru and then walked from Peru to Mexico so they could cross the border. How's that sound? Does that sound plausible? Chris says crime is only going to get worse due to so many unknown illegals here. That's true. And Zane says it has major blood feuds, and they're going to bring them here because they don't like each other either. In Africa, even within their individual countries, a lot of those tribes, they can't stand each other and they fight constantly. Chris says Staten Island and Manhattan full of illegal migrant men next to elementary schools. Lucky says, I'm never wrong. I thought I was once, but I was mistaken. There you go. PV says flying into Ecuador, no visas required, then ushered through Central America by the Red Cross and other NGOs. And Zane says, I think it's a blood diamond country. You could be right about that. And he also says Sudan is drier and hotter than here. Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're talking about, especially when you start getting more northern Africa. Yeah, they're not worried at all about being dry or having limited resources, considering where they're coming from. And one more here. It says the U.S. Customs and Border Protection has seen southwest border encounters increase exponentially every fiscal year. So far this year, there have been nearly 2 million crossings in the region, a figure that doesn't include August and September. Wow. Is that just in Tucson? Holy crap. Cochise County, Arizona is being slammed with waves of migrants bussed from other countries after crossing the border amid President Biden's laxed policies. And it says the intellectual avoidance and abandonment with intense consequences by those leaders in Washington reference our southern border continues to be a slippery slope for those doing everything we can to protect our quality of life here in Cochise County, Sheriff Mark Daniels said. We really need to take a stand. It cannot continue. It cannot continue. Chris says, who paid for their flights here? I wouldn't be surprised to find out it came from like sea virus relief money. Cruising says, I love it when David gets real with the facts. Hot and dry. They're from deserts in Africa. Yeah. I mean, seriously, what's the current temperature in the Sudan right now? About 115? If I looked it up, let me see. Tucson. I'm going to look up Tucson, Arizona's temperature. Let's play with this. Tucson, Arizona, current temperature is 91 degrees. That's what this says, with a high of not possibly 96. All right. And the Sudan's current temperature right now is 92 with a high of 101 and expected to hit 104 later this week. So it's pretty comparable. Oh, they'll be hot. They'll be hot. We can't let them be hot. Oh, man. Urban says, at what point can we begin calling it an army? It is. It is an army, unfortunately. And Zane says you can't even really farm in Sudan due to the lack of water. And Paul is here. He says, love your show as always. Keep on the firing line. Brother, I try. All People says Arizona has one of the biggest populations of African and Caribbean illegal immigrants in the United States. The BLM founders were raised in Arizona by their illegal immigrant parent and Nigerian parents. And PV says 90 days in Ecuador on a free tour visa. And then Zane says Sudan is hyper dangerous and well known for honor killings and blood debts. Well, that comes from that tribalism. We've talked about that before, especially getting into Northern Africa. There's your analogical thought process culture mixed with a tribalism culture, and blood feuds are culturally acceptable. And they go on forever. You see a lot of that in the Middle East. That's part of the problem in the Middle East. And we keep making the mistake of thinking we can get some people, we'll get Iran to sign a paper. We'll get the United Arab Emirates to sign this deal and everything will be peachy. They've been fighting over the same stupid crap for 3, 4, 5,000 years. They can't let anything go. The only way it's ever going to stop is if most of their groups were completely exterminated. I'm not advocating that, but that's literally what it would take. Even the Bible said get rid of all of them. I mean, I'm not trying to be funny, but there was times where in the Old Testament it was like, didn't I say to get rid of all of them? And you didn't do it. Zane says Sudanese culture is something I study a bit. And Prime Mover says, just send the migrants to New York City. Heard the residents love that. And the Zane chimes in again, almost 80% of Sudan's population is nomadic. They would have to be with such poor water sources. Chris says, when I go to Walmart now, it's all people speaking Spanish, African, Russian, Arabic, Hindi, and Chinese. Used to be all people who spoke English. Yeah, it's starting to look like Blade Runner, the original Blade Runner with Harrison Ford. And people spoke all kinds of languages, and they even had these weird, like, blended pseudo languages, this twin speak. And Rock Valley says, bet Biden gets 200 million votes to win. Uses all dead people to do the voting. And then Chris says, meanwhile, American veterans are homeless and on the streets. And Fluke says, not being racist, Africans are B for a reason. Whatever you mean. But anyways, moving along here, we'll jump to more migrant problems, this time in Massachusetts. Good old Massachusetts. I'm glad I got out when I did. And Illinois. Somebody asked me the states I had lived in the other day. I forgot Illinois. So how can I forget that? Illinois was a disaster. And PV says it's going to be the same in the UK soon, an Epcot County or Epcot country. Fox News, Massachusetts National Guard deployed to assist with spiraling migrant crisis as governor calls on White House. It's funny, they want to be a sanctuary city, and then when the migrants start pouring in, they're crying for Washington to come and fix it. Massachusetts National Guard members were officially deployed as rapid response teams Wednesday to assist with the state's bursting migrant shelters as pressure mounts for President Biden to address the crisis in the state. Well, he hasn't been told what to say yet. The move to deploy 250 members comes as Democratic Governor Maura Healey declared a state of emergency several weeks ago because of the strain on the shelter system. Quote, Massachusetts is in a state of emergency, and we need all hands on deck to meet this moment and ensure families have access to safe shelter and basic services, Healey said in a statement. Not, we bit off more than we can chew, not, gee, I guess we were wrong, not, this is too expensive when we can't afford it and it's a burden on our taxpayers and we already do too much to them. No, we need to make them safe. Translation, I want more money. Currently, more than 6,000 migrant families are in emergency shelters across the state. Massachusetts is a right to shelter state and must provide emergency housing to family in needs. National Guard members were sent Wednesday to 40 hotels and motels that don't have service providers. Healey said they'll coordinate access to meals, medical care, and transportation. Gee, that's a great use of the National Guard. I hope they have a real emergency. The plan that we have in place today with the deployment of the National Guard, which happened just last month, will put National Guard staff, soldiers in locations as part of a response to our non-service providers, essentially creating rapid response teams in places that we don't have the ground service contractors or case management services happening on a regular basis, Lieutenant Governor Kim Driscoll said on Tuesday. Okay. According to WFXTV or WFXT Boston 25 News, Driscoll told the local government advisory commission that between 20 and 35 families seek shelter each day in Massachusetts, occasionally swelling as high as 55 families, which creates an immediate need to try and find spaces. All of our typical emergency shelter sites were filled a month ago, Driscoll told Boston 25 News. That means we're filling in, trying to find locations. That also means that the shelters are full of migrants and they're putting traditional homeless people out in the street again. That's how it goes. And Dragon says, what does Dragon say? Something is off. Migrants that are seeking asylum from persecution wouldn't complain about free hotel lodging that is below their standards. They would be grateful. Something isn't adding up, and that's a good point, because many of them are bitching and complaining. You're getting a hotel room, a clean, serviced room with maid staff, with services. Your food is being provided. You know, your kids are being put in school. These people are hanging around in the hotel pools, and you have the nerve to bitch. And yeah, you've got a very you've got a great point there. Prime Mover says sanctuary city, but not in my backyard. Indeed. Urban says, wow, from sanctuary bliss to state of emergency overnight. That was quick. And Helter said, our National Guard is getting plenty of training to defend our nation, delivering meals, babysitting, and hanging around crowded, chaotic shelters. Our enemies are shaking in their boots. Yeah, no kidding. Oh, wow. Nature Nerd says Massachusetts is a small state. Crazy how tens of thousands are going there. They get nowhere else to go as they're shifted all over the country all the time. It doesn't stop. They're shifted all over the country. There's too many. We can't handle it. And as I pointed out, sounds mean, but it would be cheaper to put them on a charter flight and send them all the way back as deep into South America as they can go and just bribe the airport to take them. Because, yeah, they're used to that down there. Oh, yeah, we'll let them off the plane and put them outside the airport. How much are you going to pay us? They'll do it. It'd be cheaper to send them all back than it would to keep them here. But we're going to keep them, and they're pouring over the borders, both borders, north and south, nonstop, and we don't know who these people are. And they're coming from freaking everywhere. It's a massive problem. A massive problem. And Nature Nerd says, how about use the National Guard to deport the people? Yeah, that would be interesting. And that's what most other countries would do. Not Western countries, mind you. Western countries, they've lost control. All these countries these people are coming from, they'd kill you trying to cross their borders. You know what I mean? A lot of them would put you in prison, send you back, or even kill you. They would shoot you on sight approaching their border. But with that, I'll go ahead and, Stefan, you're late. Stefan, we're wrapping up. I was just about to call it off that, this is Coffee Talk. So you're listening to at Coffee Talk Live on YouTube, or Prepper University on YouTube, or fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta, where you can find me Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Friday at noon. So we will go ahead and sign off today. Hope everybody got something out of the conversation. And we will see you again tomorrow.